Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Shameless Freedom Podcast. Last week, I had an amazing guest on, and we talked about the impacts of pornography in our relationships. And it brought up so many amazing thoughts, ideas, questions. It's probably one of the longer podcasts that I've done because it just had such a ripple effect on things. So, when you typically think about the usage of pornography, you're initially thinking that it is about the relationship between partners in the bedroom. And typically that's where it starts. However, what we started to dive into is the impacts that it really has on our children. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit more today and just open up this dialogue in a different way. So let's just get started. So if you are someone who is in relationship and your partner has a porn addiction and you're feeling unfulfilled in your relationship, let's just unpack that for a moment. You may not know that there is a porn addiction, but you might be feeling undesired. You might not be feeling that fulfillment in your relationship and don't know what it is. So, what I invite you to do is to take a look at the relationship that you have. Like, what kind of intimacy do you have? What level of emotional intimacy, physical intimacy do you have? And just take note. Because maybe there's something more there that you don't realize. And this is not about changing our husband, but it is about looking into ourselves and then beginning to have open dialogues. Because here's the truth. If you are someone who is in an unfilling, unhappy relationship, it doesn't just impact your marriage. It impacts how you feel about yourself as a woman, and it also impacts your children. And that's what I want to start having a little more conversation about here. So, as moms, we want the best for our kids. We don't want them to experience the same traumas and pain that we have had. However, I want to ask you, how open are you in talking with your kids about love, sex, sexuality, relationships, pleasure, orgasm, you name it? Now, I'd like to say that if you are open in the bedroom with your partner, it's going to be a lot easier for you to be more open to the conversations with your children. And if it's hard for you to talk about, I get it. I want you to think back to, what did your parents teach you about sex? When I wrote my first book, The Good Girl, I interviewed a variety of different women, and I heard three things. I heard, don't do it until you're married, use protection, or nothing. And those are the three typical responses that most people get when it comes to talking about sexuality and intimacy with your parents. Now, I realize it's not the most fun conversation. It's an awkward conversation. However, it's a conversation that is needed. Because here's the truth. If you are not teaching your kids about love, sex, and relationships, where are they learning from? It is not the responsibility of society, culture, or religion to teach our children about this topic. Let's just take a look at the world today. And I'm not going to get into a political argument at this moment, but there is so much going on in this world in regards to sexual abuse. And here's the thing, the sexual abuse is not just to women. Yes, there's probably higher numbers to women, but the truth of the matter is, hurt people hurt people. The majority of people who are abusers in some way, shape, or form have very likely been abused themselves at some point in their lives, whether they remember it or not. So, this is a societal problem, a cultural problem that we have. And there is so much shame around the topic. There is so much judgment around it that we need to start having healthier conversations around the topic, not just with our girlfriends in the coffee shop, right? About talking about all of the, I'll call it nonsense and drama that's going on in the world today. Yes, you know what? We can have conversations on that. But you know what? I want to have conversations that are going to make a difference in the world. I want to talk about healing. I want to talk about healthy relationships. You take a look at the divorce rates today, right? How many families are divorced and kids are having parents that are no longer together in their day-to-day environment? So they're learning about relationships from what they experience in their family dynamics. We all have a different family dynamic. And then you've got society and culture, and then you've got religion, who has its own views on the topic. And anybody who's been following me for a long time knows that I have very strong opinions on religious trauma that has been created in regards to the body, sexuality, etc. That we can't expect our kids to learn from out there. Because here's the truth. You know where they're going to learn? They're going to learn from the internet. Think about that for a minute. When I was young, there was like Playboy magazines, or you went to the video store and you tried to sneak in the place with the black curtain, right? And to get an X-rated video, but it wasn't at our fingertips. And our boys and girls are learning about love, sex, the body from the internet. Now, here's the truth. There are some amazing, beautiful resources that are available online where you can learn about healthy sexuality, boundaries, tantra, things in a healthy way. But that's not where most people are learning. Most people are learning from Pornhub. They're learning from internet videos. And here's the truth. That is not what real relationships are all about. It's not even what real good sex is all about. I mean, let's be flat out honest, okay? Now, I'm not here to talk about kinks and BDSM and dom sub, all that. That's an experience, right? And there are healthy ways to experience all of the different types of things that are available out there that also aid in the healing process. Okay. So I'm not here to bash some of those experiences. However, what I am here to talk about is the impact that those videos have on our children's minds today, let alone adults, right? When I was younger, we didn't have that. I didn't have to think about the internet when my kids were younger, because there really wasn't one when they were little. I think email started coming out when I was in college. Gosh, I feel like I'm like so old these days, right? But it's very different. And this industry has grown so much and are targeting our children, targeting young boys and girls. Do you know how many boys are learning about sex from the internet? Okay, let me tell you this. That's not what girls want. That's not how to have an intimate relationship and good sexual experience with your partner. But that's what they're being taught and fed. But they don't know any different. How do we know any different unless someone talks about it? Now, I gotta say, I don't want to have conversations that are explicit with my children. However, there are conversations that need to be had. And it is up to our parents to have those conversations. I've had so many people say, Jen, why don't you talk with more teenage girls? Because I really, truly believe it's very important for teenage girls to truly understand more about love, sex, and relationships than what we were taught. I went to an all um, I went to a Catholic grade school with boys and girls, but in high school I went to all girls school. And we didn't talk about this stuff. There might have been a really small like sex education class, but it was let me teach you about the birds and the bees and how it works. And that was kind of it. There was shame, there was embarrassment. There wasn't the safeness to even have a conversation about it. Like, who's going to raise their hand even in that class, right? It's uncomfortable. But it's because as a society, we've made it uncomfortable. As parents, we've made it uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. I just want you to think about that for a moment. Anything you do in life doesn't have to be uncomfortable. It only is that way because we've made it that way. When you can own your own sexuality and your own beliefs, issues, challenges, etc., you can then show up differently to your children. You can have more open dialogue. You can talk about things that are important. You can set them up for success. Now, are there going to be things that you are going to learn through relationship? Absolutely. Right? Your parents are not going to sit down and say, okay, this is exactly how you do this with a man or a woman. Most likely. Some of the things you're going to learn through experience. However, there are resources that are available that you can use, and it will allow you to feel more knowledgeable, more comfortable having these conversations and learning. Like there are so many, there are some men that I follow that have very interesting perspectives on porn addiction and things that they do with men, etc. So it's great for me to follow some of those things and hear what they are sharing. And some of the statistics are astounding at what has been happening to men, boys and men, through this, that we just think it's natural, that there's something wrong with it. And I remember in my first book, I talk about the differences between boys and girls, and that little boys, there was a chapter, it was called Boys and Their Boners and Girls and Their Periods, right? That we teach boys that they're going to get erections and that it's okay, and that it's fun to play. And then from a girl's perspective, we teach you get periods, and they're dirty and they're gross and they're disgusting. And just right there, I just want to pause for a moment, right? We're teaching young girls that their bodies are dirty, that we got to deal with this monthly inconvenient, sometimes painful, etc. But yet we're teaching boys that it's fun, playful, it's part of life. Now, but what are we doing with teaching them about their bodies, about how to use that energy? And that, oh, it's not just all about masturbating and playing with yourself. Yes, there is positive components to that for men and women, but we need to be openly talking about this topic because if we are not, we don't know what our children are thinking. I remember one of my children, and this was a long time ago, and since there's four of them, I won't name names, so you won't know who it is. But I remember I was in my kitchen and I was talking to a coach, or I'm sorry, I was talking to a client about um, pleasure. And my son had overheard a piece of the conversation. And he said, Mom, were you using the M word? And I said, masturbation? And he said, yeah. And I remember looking at him and saying, there's nothing wrong with it. It is, it's a natural thing to do. It's a natural expression, and there should be no shame or judgment around it. It's something that, you don't want to do in public, you want to do in the privacy of your own space, etc. But it's not something that's bad, wrong, dirty, shameful. And I swear to God, I saw the shame literally wipe off his face. It was weird. It was like there were no other words necessary. And that's one of the beginnings of my journey. Again, like this was years ago that I thought that my husband was having the conversations with my children because they're boys, right? Boys want to hear from their dads, they don't want to hear from their moms. You know what? It doesn't matter. Yes, a dad's going to teach a son something different. A mom's going to teach a daughter something different because of being that same sex. However, it's important that we have the right dialogue with our children around these topics because there is way too much abuse, objectification that is happening, which is bleeding into our own worthiness of who we are. Last night, I went and I attended a book event by Valerie Bertinelli, and she has a new book out called Getting Naked. And she wanted to talk about getting naked with your feelings, your emotions, like allowing everything to come out. And she also shared about sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse, and how it impacted who she was as a young girl and as a woman. And this goes for boys and girls, men and women, that if we have been abused, if we have been taken advantage of, if our mind, body, soul has been taken advantage of, we need to be able to process that anger, process the grief, the sadness of the innocence that was taken away from us, because what it does is it stops us from being the most authentic version of who we are. Your children want to see your light, your radiance, your magnetism. And if you are holding on to bitterness, anger, resentment, they're not getting all of you. They're only getting pieces of you. They are screaming for more of you. And so often, we're not allowing all of that to come through. And it is more important in this day and age for us to talk more with our kids about the shame that so many of us feel, the pressure that we create in this area. Like, just think about pressure in general. Like, we put pressure on our kids to perform in school. Think about the pressure of performing in the bedroom. There's performance anxiety. There's pressure. Because here's the truth. There's two things, right? We want to please our partners. We want to give them pleasure. And we also want to receive. And when you have the pressure of thinking about both of those things, it can create more anxiety in the bedroom than you realize. Like, one of the things I hear from men all of the time is they want to feel like a man. They don't want to feel like their masculinity is ripped away from them. And men can very easily get triggered if the woman is not pleased. They think less of themselves. They think I'm not as good of a man if I'm not pleasing my woman in that way. And we need to have open dialogue on what is the root cause of this problem. The root cause of the problem is not sex in itself. It is how we talk about love, sex, relationships, the body. We are not creating an environment for safe conversations to happen. If you take a look at my website when I talk about my vision and my mission for the planet, is to have open and healthy relationships, to have open and healthy conversations around this topic so that men, women don't have this negative idea of the body and have this body shame amongst ourselves, to release this pressure to have more intimate, healthy connections with ourselves. This is the core of who we are. We were made as men and women by God as different. We are different creatures. And our bodies are made differently. Our hormones are different. That we're not supposed to be the same. But it is those body parts that make us uniquely different. And it's important to talk about them in a healthy and safe way to create the right environment. Now, I've had many moms say to me, well, what's the right age to start talking to my kids about sex? I'd like to share some statistics from other countries. And in my book, my first book, there is an article on, I think it's Peggy Ornstein did a TEDx talk, and she interviewed college girls from America, and then I believe it was from the Netherlands. And the statistics were that in other countries, they're teaching about love and relationships at age 6 in kindergarten. They're not separating sex from love and relationships. They're talking about it together. They're teaching it at a young age. And why is that? It's because love, sex, and relationships all go together. Now, every relationship that you have that has love is not going to have sex. However, it is important to start talking about those concepts at a young age because here's what happens. As they get older, it becomes easier to have those conversations. There's no shame involved. It's a conversation. There's no judgment. There's no judgment about what you think. There's no judgment about what you say, what your desires or fantasies or kinks or whatever it might be. It just is. And the more that we can create a safe container to have these conversations, the better our world will be. Our children will be more informed at a younger age. And we won't have to worry about the internet or other people teaching our children about something that should start in the home. And if you are looking for more support on this topic, I am going to be hosting some upcoming workshops because I'm getting a lot of questions and comments on this topic. And it's important for us as parents to be able to have open dialogue and conversations. And if we're uncomfortable and we don't know how to have the conversation, then we need support in having the conversation so that it's not only going to help ourselves, it's going to help our kids. We all want the best for them. And that also comes with having some of those hard conversations. And again, I'd like to say it's only hard and uncomfortable because we claim it is. We claim it to be hard and uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be. So I invite you to consider, what do you talk about on this topic? Do you actually think about it? What do you say to yourself? What do you talk? Do you talk about it? Do you talk about it with your partner? Do you talk about it with your friends? Do you have an open dialogue with your kids? Because the truth of the matter is, we need more healthy, safe conversations happening in this space so that our kids don't grow up fearing and judging their bodies, their sexuality, and that we as adults don't continue to shy away from the topic because we are models for them. When we model permission to love your body, love yourself, and how to express that than others, that is where more and more love is going to change and impact the world.